Last week, Netflix started a new series of Resident Evil. This is the third time that the games have been tried to be adapted into a live action format. And this was one season, 8 episodes worth. And a lot of people have already seen it and commented on it. And I want to share my thoughts on it. But I also want to share my thoughts in general of the live action adaptations. Because there is an overarching theme to these that I want to hit in on. And I want to focus in on a little bit more as this video progresses. First, let's talk about the show itself. This one takes place between two different times. We follow the Wesker family, being led by Albert Wesker, played by Lance Reddick, as he's just moved into this new neighborhood in South Africa, which is being managed by the Umbrella Corporation, and he's with his two daughters, Jade and Billie Wesker. As they get there, some shady stuff seems to be happening, however, and it seems like the Umbrella Corporation is working on something that could potentially go horribly wrong and cause somewhat of a pandemic, which could result in an apocalypse. Cut to 14 years later, apocalypse has happened, and humanity is struggling to survive, and we follow an adult Jade Wesker, played by Ella Balinska, who is trying to basically get back to her family, but also trying to find ways to essentially take down Umbrella, keep evading them, and hopefully find some kind of a cure for the T-virus spreading. There is a really, really good show in here. I feel like sometimes you can see it seep through the cracks, especially when it comes to the 2022 stuff with Albert Wesker and Evelyn Marcus, played by Paula Nunes. There is that sort of rivalry between them happening at Umbrella, which is eventually going to lead to the T-virus outbreak that I thought was the most interesting storyline of the entire season. All that stuff was really great. Whenever it focused on what Albert Wesker was doing, that was interesting. But every time it went back to Jade, it just became this choppy, weirdly paced mess. And unfortunately, because of that, it was hard to sort of comprehend at times what was, supposed to be interesting about the present day stuff. Because it would be moments where you thought there was character building happening, followed immediately by a major action sequence that was just a bunch of, gore and guts, which, fine, yeah, you go to Resident Evil for that too, but like I said, it's the essence, right? If you're not really caring about the characters, why would I care about one of them getting, bitten and killed? That's not gonna work over here. Something that actually hit me while I was watching this, and I'm gonna go into some spoilers here. I was trying to keep it spoiler free, but I'll mention a couple of things. When Billie gets bitten by the zombie dog in episode 1, and you're constantly worried that she's gonna turn into a creature too, there's a moment where Jade and Billie are asking their dad, Albert, about what's going on, and then how infectious this could be. To which Albert's reply is, "Oh, it's not like COVID." So am I to understand that in this timeline, the show's timeline, it's taking place in real time? This 2022, the one we're in right now. Which means COVID happened, and now, right after COVID has happened, we're gonna go into the zombie apocalypse. That timing is crazy. That is the most tragic human trajectory I've heard of. We went from one pandemic to the zombie apocalypse in this show in one fell swoop. That is a theme in itself. Can you imagine the tragedy of that? The kind of trauma that comes with that? If you want to do some thematic elements that are deep and hard-hitting in an adult sense, there you go. There's something genuinely shocking about that. But that's not there in this. That would have been a great opportunity. It's a missed opportunity, but whatever. There's a lot of missed opportunities like that throughout the show. But I will say, the stuff that they do with Jade and Billie, the younger ones, it's a little on and off. There were times where I was genuinely invested in the stuff that's going on between the two of them, especially when it comes to unraveling the conspiracies in Umbrella, especially with their dad. That stuff was really interesting. But there's also a high school drama thing going on for a few episodes, in those first few episodes. That was genuinely, it took me out of the whole thing more times than I thought I would. There were moments where it just felt like I was watching any high school drama. The musical choices also were so abrasive. Every episode, I think, was ending with a pop music track, so that was a little strange. Like they really seem to try and do this in the most, Gen Z way possible. Like let's try and get those viewers in as much as possible. Like we'll have songs by, Billie Eilish or Dua Lipa, and hopefully those will work. Now I like Billie Eilish and Dua Lipa just fine, as much as the next person does, but I have to be honest, like it feels really out of context. Speaking of Billie Eilish, when you're first introduced to Billie Wesker in this, she's listening to Oxytocin by Billie Eilish, and she looks like Billie Eilish. She has the white highlights as well, and that goes on throughout to the other parts of the season when she's an adult and you're seeing her as in that form. So, credit where it's due. They kind of stuck to that inside joke throughout, which I'm not even sure if it's a joke after a while, right? Because if that character is just going to be like that, you have to at some point be like, hey, Billie Eilish, yeah, that's the reason of being, man. That's who I am. Like, I guess so. So, yeah. Did Billie Eilish survive the zombie apocalypse? Maybe she's making new music. Maybe she's making new music, and that's how she's still keeping the look. Right? Maybe, I don't know. I mentioned earlier that you get a lot of stuff at Umbrella which led to the T-Virus outbreak, and I thought that was interesting. Like all the, sort of disintegrating mental capacity of Evelyn Marcus, for instance, is really great. And eventually her just, snapping and being like, hey, let's just do all the craziest stuff that we could possibly think of, violate every human right in the world to basically sell this drug that would probably help a lot of people, but if taken too much is going to turn them into zombies. Should work out just fine. And Paula Nunes is having a great time in this. Seriously, if the entire show was Lance Reddick and Paula Nunes just like duking it out on like who's essentially going to be, top dog when it comes to Umbrella, but they're also trying to essentially evade one another because of the incident with Billie Wesker, all of that stuff, that would have been a great show. Like that should have been the entire show. But, we can't have everything. The concepts that the show introduces are genuinely very interesting. However, I have been seeing a lot of people write this show off pretty quickly. In some cases, people watched the first couple of episodes and were struggling to go beyond. And I will, full disclosure, say this. If that is one of you, I don't necessarily blame you. I am also one of those people, however, who maintains that, hey, give things a chance, maybe see the entire thing, and maybe you'll end up liking it a little bit more. And I could say that the first half of this season is honestly not good at all. But the second half of it is an improvement. It is much more entertaining and much more interesting. But then again, I would have to ask you to watch 4 hours more of television before that, before coming to the 4 hours of television that are like better, but they're still flawed in several ways. But that being said, I still think that if you decide to ride out the show a little bit, you might find yourself enjoying it a little bit. But I know that when it comes to the fans of the video games, they've been very quick to say, yeah, we don't want to do anything when it comes to this. And I understand that entirely. Which leads into a bigger point that I had an issue with throughout this entire season, which also connects to the issues I have with the live action movies that they've tried. Something that I feel like is often lost is this sense of what Resident Evil is. The essence of the franchise, if you will. Because yes, it's horror. There's a lot of creepy imagery, and you see some really creepy creatures along the way that obviously, are there to instill some nightmares inside you. But it's also got a constant sense of fun, and you're able to connect with the characters as a result of it. Like it knows what it is. That's some of the things about Resident Evil that I feel like works the best. So even when it got really, really dark, it didn't forget the roots. And something that I feel like the adaptations, ever since the Mila Jovovich movies that are now starting 20 years ago, that first one was in 2002, they seem to have made this common mistake of trying to be more about the creepy imagery rather than keeping that tone in check. And unfortunately, what is also losing in the process of that is the overall vibe of it. Like, it doesn't feel like Resident Evil. I think the closest that they've come for any of it feeling like Resident Evil is parts of this show, but also the latest movie, which was Welcome to Raccoon City, which I thought was not good at all. But it seemed to have the atmosphere of a Resident Evil game, which is something that I should give points to. And there are moments in this series where you can feel that, where it feels like, okay, this is part of that universe. But then there are other moments where it feels like it's deriving so much of, stuff from things you've seen before, other zombie things that you've seen before, that it ends up becoming way too borderline, like, stale. Actually, it's like, all right, we've seen this 1,000 times before. Like, there's a couple of scenes in very early on that are just basically World War Z. I feel like there's images that are being shown in the pitch meetings or whatever it is, and the writers and the people involved are like, all right, here are some things that work in the Resident Evil games. These are some things that are pulled from there. We will try doing this in our movies or now our show, and hopefully this will create something that fans enjoy. But the thing is, images only go so far, because you have to, at the end of the day, capture something compelling. Even if you want to tell your own story, don't forget where you're coming from. When it comes to adaptations, that's something that's very, very important. It's why you can watch something like, say, and I know that this franchise is not like the best at the moment, but like, let's say the Harry Potter movies. Now, the Harry Potter movies, they don't follow the books to a T. They make a lot of changes, especially towards the ending. There are so many things that they switch up, and obviously they've done some stuff to, make it more cinematic or something like that, and that's fine. But it never lost what it's trying to do, the story it's trying to tell, the characters that are in the middle of it. And so when you get to something like the finale, Deathly Hallows Part 2, which changes a lot from the way the finale is shown in the book, it's, yeah, sure, it's much bigger and much more cinematic, but at the end of the day, the focus is on Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and it's about them being in the situation, while not losing sight of the fact that there are other Hogwarts professors and students who are involved in this massive battle, and their lives are at risk. And so you find all of that is put into perspective really well. That's something that I feel like the Resident Evil shows and even the movies have lacked. Maintaining what makes it work, or at least keeping that essence within, even if you want to try something of your own. And I think that's a major disadvantage that the industry seems to find itself with, because at the time now with this, I feel like the lessons aren't being learned. So either take a moratorium for like 10 years or something like that, recalibrate, and really figure out what you want to do. Because otherwise it's going to be the same thing over and over again, and people are not going to enjoy it. And like I said, there are merits to this season. There are things to appreciate. I think visually, it is very good. There are some really great special effects on display over here. Some of the creature stuff that they've done is genuinely remarkable. Like I said, a lot of stuff pulled from the games, and that is to be praised. But again, that can only take you so far if you're losing out what makes those special. And that's not to say that the main characters aren't good. I liked Jade and Billie Wesker. I liked adult Jade, Ella Balinska, quite a bit. I thought she was very good. She was really, really crushing it in some of the action sequences. But again, it just all feels a little undercooked, and it feels like stuff that you've seen before, like it's deriving from a lot of those things more often than not. And so the whole season is sort of a mixed bag of stuff where I was liking a lot of it, but at the same time I was disliking a lot of it. And those first 4 episodes, like I said, are really a chore to get through. Like, I don't blame people for turning off their television during those bits, Like, I remember I saw the first 2 episodes, and then I couldn't watch the show for a couple of days because I was like, well, I don't know where this is going. But then some people assured me, like, hey, keep watching, it gets a little bit better. But I also have to tell you to watch 4 other episodes before that are not necessarily better. That's a huge leap of faith that maybe some people are not ready to take. So I don't know. I'm just hoping that whoever comes in for the next thing, whether it be the season 2 for this, or whether it just be another adaptation, just understand the material better. Because if you're not going to do that, we're going to do this rinse repeat cycle over and over and over again. And the track record is not that great. And so the idea of going into something open-minded, it can only sustain you for so long until eventually it just buckles under you. And then, it's not gonna work after a while. That faith can only go so far. But going back to the show, if I was to give a brief description overall of what I thought of this season, I would say it's on par with what they just did with Halo Season 1. There's elements in it which are really good, and there are things that are promising that could lead to a better second season. But as of right now, I'm looking at this whole thing and I'm going, well, it's whatever, it's okay. But it's just definitely is losing that essence. I keep going back to that word because, again, after 20 years, you kind of have to be like, hey man, what are we doing wrong over here? If you want a grade for this season, however, I'm gonna give it a C plus. There is a genuinely like half a season in here that I think is pretty enjoyable, but there is another half of it which it just did not work for me at all. But it sort of matches up to that Halo season in overall quality. Like they're both just fine. They're whatever. But I don't know. I know the fans have lambasted this season, so I know that it's not going over super well with them. But I'm hoping that eventually someday they get the live action adaptation that they deserve. When that happens, that'll be great. So guys, if you are fans of Resident Evil in general, what did you think of this season? What are your thoughts on, the adaptations overall? And leave them in the comments below, let me know. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and hope you guys have a great weekend.